Hello friends, so today I'm going to teach one of the most important topic in Java, that is constructor. So we'll start concept called constructor. Okay, so this is actually one of the most important concept basic Java. But before starting constructor, I just want to explain a few more details about what is variable, what is local variable, what is instance variable, and what is static variable. So let's start. Then after I will start what is constructor. Then we start then I will explain what is default constructor, who is going to create the default constructor, and what should be there in the inside the constructor, and how we are writing the constructors. All those things we can. I'll explain all those things. Yeah. So let us start. So before going to constructor, I'll tell what is variable actually. So suppose let's say one class is there. So the one class is there, class text. And here let's say public static void main. Main method is there. And inside the main method, let's say I have written and declare one variable int x equal to 10, right? So if I'm trying to print the value of x, like system.out.println of x, then what should be the value? The value I'll get the output as 10, right? Because the value of the x is called 10. So if I'll instead of 10, if I'll write 20, then what should be the output? Output should be 20, right? If I'll instead of 20, if I'll put the value x equal to 30, then what should be the value of x I'm printing? It should be 30. Output I'll get 30, right? So that means the value of the x is not constant, right? It is varying from one value to another value if I'm changing something, right? So let's say I'm printing int x is equal to 20. Then system.out.println, this is x I'm printing, so the x value is 20, right? So it is the value of the x is not constant. So if I change something, then accordingly the value of the x, the output I'll get accordingly, right? If I'll put it as 30, then it will be coming as 30, right? So what is then variable? Variable is nothing but whose value will be varied from one value to another value. So that is called variable. Whose value will vary, that is called variable. So when we will declare one variable, so this is one method, right? And this is called, we are calling it method body, right? So whenever we will define a variable inside a method or inside a block or inside the constructor, that variable we can call as local variable. Okay, so that means we are defining this variable inside the method body itself. So that means this variable we can call it as local variable, because this variable we are defining inside this method body. I'm defining this variable, the value of x, right? So that is called local variable. Okay, so similarly, if one method is there, let's say I'm taking as public static void main. This is the main method I'm taking. If I will take the variable, if I will define one variable inside the method, then what we can call this variable as local variable. This we can call as local variable. Clear? So similarly, if I define the variable outside of the class, outside of the method, let's say if I am defining here, if I am declaring here int y equal to, let's say 30, then we can call this variable as instance variable. Okay. So if I define a variable outside the method or outside the constructor or outside the block, then that variable we can call as instance variable. Okay. And we can say like this instance variable are also object level variable. This we can call it as object level variable. Okay. So there are like one variable is local variable and one more variable is instance variable or object level variable. Okay. So one more type of variable is also there. Let's say I am defining int z equal to 40. That means this one is also one variable, right? Z is variable. So if I will define or if I will write a keyword called static, then this variable we can call it as static variable. Okay. So this z is nothing but static variable because we are adding one variable called static over here. Okay. So there are three types of variables are there. One is local variable, one is instance variable or object level variable, or we can say it as also non-static variable. As we are not using static keyword over here, right? So that means why we can call it as non-static variable. And z, we want to, if we put the keyword static, then we can call it as static variable. Okay. So that means what we understood is like there are three types of variables are there. There are three types of variables are there. There are three types of variables are there. One is local variable. Another one is instance variable. And one more variable we can call it as static variable. Okay. So the purpose of constructor is nothing but we are initializing this instance variable. The purpose of constructor is nothing but this is the instance variable, right? To initialize the instance variable of an object, we should go for constructor, right? So what is initialization means? Let's say I'm writing a class test. Okay, and here let's say suppose when method it is there, public static void main string array of parts. Then if I will just define int x, that means I am declaring that x is a variable, that is a int type of variable, that I am just declaring. So we can call this one as declaring. Here variable declaring. I am declaring this variable. Okay. But if I will instead of declaring or instead of defining that variable, if I am assigning some value to this variable, let's say int x equal to 10, that means I am assigning one value, int value to x. that means I am initializing this variable. That is called initializing, right? So initializing means I am assigning some value to that particular variable. That is called initialization. I am doing the initialization activity. Okay. So the main purpose of constructor is we can initialize or we can assign one value of an object. How I can show you? Let's say one class is there. Class. Okay. How it will initialize that I will explain after some time. But before that, I just want to tell you how we can define a constructor or how we can write a constructor. Like class. Let's say class name we need to put a class test. Okay. The constructor, how we can write is the name of the constructor should be the name of the class. It should be the same as the name of the class. Like if I want to write a constructor, that means the name of the class is test. That means I need to write a name as test. Then it should have a parenthesis, and inside this parenthesis we can take the input variable for that constructor, right? Then constructor, as like method is having one body, method body, similarly constructor should have also constructor body. So that means it is this part we can call it as body. Okay, that means it is body of the constructor. Okay, so how we can write the constructor? Like we should write the constructor. The name of the constructor should be the name of the class. Okay. So let's say I just want to initialize an instance variable for an object by using constructor. How we can do it? See, let's say I like class employee. Let's say I am creating one employee object. Okay, and employee is having two instance variable. Let's say in employee ID, okay, and string employee name. Okay, so let's say I am having method public static void main. This is main method I am writing. Okay. Suppose let's say I will create one employee object. How we can create the employee object? Employee E1 equal to new employee. Okay. Then if I will try to print the system.out.println E1 dot employee ID and system.println E1 dot employee name, then what we'll get? We have only defined this one, or we are only declaring the variable like employee ID and employee name. So that means we are not initializing, right? So the default value should be assigned to this variable initially. So the default value for int variable is 0, and for string variable it will be null. So if I will try to print this one, then I will get the output as 0, and for this we will get null, because as we are not assigning the variable. Okay, let me show you that one small example. Let me show you. Let me open the command prompt, and from here let me try to open the notepad. employee. Let me open the employee of Java. Okay, so let's say I have created one class called class employee, which is having two instance variable. Let's say private name int employee ID. String employee name. Okay, so let's say for this class employee I have created two instance variable that I have created, and it is not having any static keyword, so we can call, and it is not inside the method, then we can call this one as instance variable, right? So if I try to create the employee object, let's say I am creating one class text, and let me write the main method static void main. Okay, so let me create the employee class object. So how we can create the employee class object? We can create like employee e1 equal to new employee. Then, so if I try to print system dot out dot println, if I am trying to print the value of the employee ID and employee name, system dot out dot println e1 dot, okay, let me have some meaningful sentence. Employee ID is how we can access that variable by object, right? So e1 dot employee ID. Fine. And employee name is, we can write e1 dot emp name, right? So what should be the output over here? See, as I am not defining or as I am not initializing the variable of this employee ID and employee name, I have only declared those variables. These two variables I have only declared. That means the default value will be assigned over here. That means the employee ID and employee name should have the default value. Then the employee ID is 0 and employee name should be null over here. Let me compile and execute. Clear this. So code got compiled fine. Sorry, I have taken employee.java, right? So I need to compile as employee.java. Okay. So code got compiled fine. Let me execute. See, the employee ID is 0 and the employee name is null. As I told, like it is having the default value. So the default value will be assigned over here. So whatever the object, suppose let's say I'm trying to print three employee object. Okay. So all the employees should have the same default value because I have not reassigned or I have not assigned those variable, instance variable, right? So let's say this is A2 and this is A3. A2 and A2 dot name, employee name, and over here this is A3 and this is also A3. That means what should be the value for all the employee object? I'll get the default value, right? So let me compile the code. Java. So code got compiled fine. Let me execute. Okay. So as you can see, those three statement it is printing with the default value. The employee ID is 0, but employee name is null. The employee ID is 0, employee ID name is null. Employee ID is 0 and the employee name is null. Because we have not assigned those values. Let's say if I will not go for constructor, so if the constructor concept is not there, then what is the problem we can face? Let's say I will define over here employee ID is equal to let's say 111 and the employee name let's say person. Okay, so now the employee ID I have assigned, I have initialized, and the employee name I have initialized. Let's say let me try with one employee object, then that one will try with multiple employee object. Okay, so let me save it. So now employee ID is 111 and employee name is person now. So if I will try to print this variable like e1.employee ID and if I will call this one e1.employee name, then what should be the value I will get? I will get the employee ID as 111 and I will get the employee name as person, right? So let me compile the code. See, employee.java, then Java test. This test is having the main method, that's why I am executing its Java test. Okay. So if you will see, employee ID is 111 and the name of the employee is person. Okay, because I have initialized this variable. Okay, clear? Then suppose if I will not go for constructor, then what should be the problem or what should be the issue? See, in one company there should not be one employee, right? There could be multiple employees will be there. Let's say here those two employees are there. Okay, like E1 and E2 and E3. Let's say three employees are there. So if I am trying to print those variables, then what should be the value? See, for employee 1, employee ID will be 111 and the employee name will be Prasanna. And for employee 2, the employee ID will be same 111 and the employee name will be same Prasanna. Because I have initialized in the global level for all the employee object that I will create. So for all the employee object, the variable of that particular object will be having the same value. Got it? So let me try to compile and execute. Java C. So it is not saved. Let me save it. So code got compiled fine. See what is the output I am getting over here. So the employee IDs I am getting as 111 and the employee ID is Prasanna. For employee ID, the second sentence also, and for employee 2 and employee 3 also the same output I am getting. As I am initiating the global level, means for all the employee object I am defining one particular value, but it should not be the case, right? Because one company with same name and with same employee ID, the employee should not be there, right? There could be multiple employee ID and different employee ID and different employee names should be there, right? For respective employee, right? So what we can do is then we can go for constructor to initialize this object. So this is one object, this is one also object, and this is one object. So there are, so in this, let's say in this company, three employees are there. Okay. So but the value, the instance variable, employee ID and employee name should be different from one object to another object, right? The name of the employee 1 should be different from the name of name and employee ID from the employee 2, and the employee ID and employee name should be different from in the employee 3 should be different from the employee 2, right? So here in this case, what we can do, as I told, we need to write one constructor. Only we need to define the variable. Like int employee ID, let's say, and int employee name. Okay. Then what we can do, we can write a constructor. So how we can write a constructor? The name of the constructor should be the name of this class name. So if I want to write a constructor, that means I need to write the constructor name. Okay. Then constructor should have a body. Right? Then what I need to do? I need to initialize this employee object with their ID, employee ID and employee name. Right? So what we need to do? So while creating the employee object, I need to initialize those employee object with this employee ID and employee name. So that means we need to take an input parameter over here, like int employee ID, string employee name. Okay. So if I'll write like this dot ID equal to empty ID and this dot employee name equal to employee name. Fine. So here what I am doing is, how So what I told you, like we need to define a constructor. So how we can define a constructor? We need to have the same name as its class name, employee, and it should have the input parameter with which value I need to initialize those variable. This variable. So while this constructor will be called, so at the time of creating the object itself. So here if you will see, we are creating employee object, right? Employee E1 is equal to new employee, right? So what we are doing, we are creating an employee class object. So we need to pass how we can call this constructor. So this is called constructor. We are doing constructor calling over here. If you will see, this is the new and this is the class name with parenthesis, right? So we are calling the constructor over here. So as it is taking the two input parameter, then we need to pass two input parameter. Okay. So let's say I am passing 111 and I am passing the employee name as Prasanna. Okay. So the employee ID and employee name I am passing over here. So it is what it is doing while creating this object. So this constructor will be called with this input parameter. So it will come to this constructor, and the employee ID it will be assigned as 111 and the employee name will be Prasanna. Then what I am doing is, so this dot employee ID. So this will always refer to the current object value. So this will refer always current class object. Means I am creating the E1 object, right? So it will refer to this E1 object. So inside this E1 object, whatever the value will be there, employee ID and employee name. So it will refer to that employee ID and employee name. Okay. So this dot employee ID means, so it will refer to this employee ID, this instance variable. So this dot employee ID equal to employee ID. That means it is whatever the path it is passing as input parameter, right? So this 111 will be assigned. So now the employee ID of this instance variable will be assigned as 111, and this dot employee name will be employee name. The employee name that I have passed as Prasanna, so that it will be assigned to this employee name. So in this instance variable. Got it? So in this way we can initialize those instance variables. So similarly, I am creating two more objects. Let's say, sorry, I don't need to put double quote over here as it is an int variable. Let's say this is 111, and let's say this is one more one is there, and one more object I am creating with the name as, let's say, whatever name I am just writing. So there are three employee objects I am creating with different value, right? So first of all, when the JVM will execute this main method, first of all it will try to create this employee object, and while creating the employee class object, it will call the constructor with these two variables, 111 and Prasanna. So it will coming to this constructor with that particular value. Okay. So now the employee ID is 111 and employee name is Prasanna. So as I told, like this dot employee ID means it will refer to this employee ID, and this employee ID it will refer to here. So what is the variable over here? So it is 111. So now the 111 will be assigned to this employee ID, that means this instance variable. Okay. Similarly, this employee name is referred to this employee name. So what is the driver first. I passed as person now. So it will comes to this one. Employee name will be person will be assigned to this variable. That means we will assign to this instance variable. Okay. So now it will try to print the employee IDs, employee 1 with employee ID. So what is this object? Employee 1 object. So what is the value of this employee 1 object? That means 111 and person it will print. So similarly, it will print 112 and couple. Okay. So let me compile and let me show you the execution. Java C employee dot. Okay, code got compile fine. Let me execute this. So see, as you see, right, the employee ID is 1 and the employee name is person. In the second statement, now the value is getting changed. The employee ID is 112 and the employee name is the one. And here also the employee ID is 113. The employee name is 2. I hope you guys understood. Okay. So the main purpose of the constructor is to initialize an object. So what does it means, like to initialize an object means to initialize the instance variable that is present inside that object. That is called means that we are initializing by using constructor. Okay. So this is what about constructor. So there are few rules are there also. So let me explain that also. So as of now, what we can see, what we have seen. So let's say what I show you. Like let's say one class is there, class employee is there. Okay, and let's say I have created declaring two variables. Let's say int employee ID and string employee name. Okay, and I'm defining the constructor. How we can define the constructor? The name of the constructor should be the name of the class. Okay, and I'm taking the input parameter like int employee ID with string employee name. Okay, so now constructor should have the body, right? So what I can write here is this dot employee ID equal to employee ID. Okay, and this dot employee name should be employee name. Now in the class test public static void main method, what we can do is we can create one employee class object like employee E1 is equal to new employee. Let's say 111 person name. Okay, so I'm trying to printing E1 dot employee ID E1 dot employee name. So see, so here when I'll just show you guys. See, over here JVM is there. Let's say JVM is trying to execute this program. So it will call to main method. It will comes to main method. So and the first statement what it is written, it is trying to create this employee class object, right? And with this parameter, input parameter, right? So over here itself, it is calling the constructor employee. So why, as part of this here itself, so it will comes to constructor. Okay. So from here, I am passing the, it is a 111. I am passing the value as 111 and person now. So the employee ID value will be assigned to 111, and here employee name will be person now, right? So as I told, this dot employee ID, right? So this dot employee ID means it will refer to this employee ID. Right? So what it will be? So for this employee ID, now the value of the what this dot employee ID means this employee ID. Okay. So this dot employee ID equal to employee ID. That means it will, this employee ID is nothing but this one, the input variable that I have passed. Okay. So this is this that the local variable of this value means input parameter. Whatever the value is there, 111, it will be assigned to this variable. So 111. So now this dot employee ID means this employee ID I am assigning as 111, and string dot employee, this dot employee name as similarly person number. So this will be having person number, right? So in the E1 object, so let's say this one is E1 object, and here employee ID I have assigned as 111, and employee name I have assigned person number. So now if I will try to access this E1 dot employee ID, it will be printing as 111, and E1 dot employee name, it will be printing as person. I hope you guys understood now, right? Okay. So there are few loopholes are there. So let's say I have created one class. Let me, okay. Let's say one class is there, class test. Okay, and it is having public static void main method. Okay, so now here in this class, if I, and let's say I'm printing something, let's say hi. Okay, so here in this class test, how many methods are there? So there is one method which is called main method, right? And while compiling, so after compilation, so then I'm trying to execute, then I'll get the output as hi. Okay. So but is there any constructor there inside this class? So answer is yes, because whenever, every class should have a constructor. Every class should have a constructor. Okay. So if I'll not write any constructor over inside this class, then a default constructor will be created. So what will be happening? Here in this class test, I have not written any constructor, right? So here a default constructor will be created. What will be created? A default constructor. Okay. So a default constructor will be created. So who is responsible to create this default constructor is nothing but compiler will be responsible to create this default constructor. Fine. So what I'm saying is like, so whenever we are not defining any constructor, so by default compiler will create this default constructor at the time of compilation. That means when I'm, let's say for example, I have written this code and I have not defined any constructor, then what I did, I am trying to compile this code, Java C test.java. Okay, so while I will try to compile this code, so my compiler will check does this class is having any constructor or not. So compiler check that no, there is no constructor, it is there. Then what this compiler will do? Compiler will write one constructor by itself. How it will write? Like the same rule, the name of the constructor should be the name of the class, right? So this is the name of the constructor with no argument. Okay, there will be no argument will be there, and as usual, the constructor should have the body. Okay, so like this, a default constructor will be printing by the compiler. Okay. So one more thing, every constructor, so whatever the constructor, it could be I will write or default constructor will be created by the compiler. Every constructor should have two keywords, either or. Either it should have a keyword called super, or there will be keyword called this. Either or, not both, either or. So so whatever the constructor will write, every constructor should have at least super or this. Either or, must and should, we should have this keyword in this constructor. So if we will not define any keyword or if we will not define either super or this, then by default it will be, the compiler will write as super. I hope you guys clear, because see, if will not means every constructor should have either super or this. But as a programmer, if will not write anything, then by default what compiler will do? Compiler will check. First of all, it will check does this class is having any constructor or not. It is not. Then what we will do? Constructor will create this default constructor. Then the next rule, every constructor should have the either super or this. So as there is no constructor, then compiler what will do? It will write as super. Okay, what is super means? It will call the super class constructor, right? So here, as you can see, class test is not extending to any class. That means what should be the super class of it? Okay, so there is one class called object. Okay, so this object class is the parent class for all the classes. So if I will not write anything means that means it is a child class of object class. That means class test here extends object, it is already written which is in hiding nature. This no one means if will not writing means, so by default it is extending to object. Okay, so object means object one class it is there which is provided by Java. Okay, yeah. So this super, so if I will not write any constructor, so your compiler will create one default constructor, and as part of the default constructor it will write one keyword called super. Even though here I have not written any constructor, that means compiler what it will check, does this employee class is having any constructor? Yes, this employee class is having one constructor called employee class constructor, right? But the second rule is constructor inside the constructor, every constructor should have either super or this. I have not written anything, right? Then what constructor will do? Constructor will write it here itself super. as part of the dot class file. So inside the dot class file, what it will represent this super, he will write as super. Okay. So if I have written, let's say I have written this, that means compiler will check does this is having either super or this. Yeah, I have written this. The compiler will say like, yeah, this, the programmer has written this. That means he will not write anything. That he will keep he will write. That means he will not do anything. Means already programmer has been written the this. Okay, this means current class constructor. Means it will call the current class constructor. Super means it will call the parent class constructor. Okay, I hope you guys understood. And the third rule is the super and this. So there are like, so here this either we can write as this or we can write super, right? See, for every constructor, either we should have this, we can call this constructor, or we should have to call super class constructor. Okay, so and the third rule is the first statement of the constructor should be either this or super. That means if I have written this constructor over here, suppose let's say I have written this over here, that means I cannot write super over here, because if I write super here, super constructor over here, then I will get compile time error as like super should be the first statement. Then if I remove this super in the second line, and if I write in the first line super, and I'll write this as second line, then again it will say like I'll get the compile time error like this should not be the second statement, this should be the first statement. Okay, so the third rule is this or super, it should be having in the first line, it cannot be in the second line. Okay, if we'll write this, if we'll call this constructor, then we cannot write super constructor. If we'll write super class constructor, then we cannot write this class constructor. Let me show you. See, let's say for this example, I am trying to, let's say I am trying to write super. Okay, so now as it is extending to, it is not extending to any class. That means the parent class of this class is object class. Okay, so now this super it will call to the object class constructor. Okay, so let me compile it. Okay, compile got fine. Then let me execute. See, there is nothing, but yeah, as it is calling super class constructor, that means it is calling to the object class. Let me try with this. Okay, so this means it will call the current class constructor. Let me compile it. See, there is no constructor with no argument parameter, because I am calling this class constructor. So this means current class constructor. Does this employee class is having any constructor with no argument parameter? No, right? So that is why it is showing like constructor employee in class employee cannot be applied to given types. This, because it is required int and string, because there is only one constructor with int and string. Okay, so let me write one more constructor. Okay, let me print a dummy statement. System system.out.println, let's say hi, I'm just printing. Okay, so now let me compile this code. See, okay, let me clear the screen. Okay, so code got compiled fine, and what should be the output I will get? Apart from this one, I will get high also will be printing, because as I am creating three objects, so 3 times this it will be called, right? So 3 times I am getting printed. Okay, so but yeah, what I have told, either we can write this. So if you will see, if I will try to compile this code, so compiler will see, is there any this or super is there? Yes, it is there. Then that means constructor will not write any super, right? But if I will not write anything, that means compiler will going to write. Means compiler is going to write super. Super means it will call the super class constructor. Okay, but yeah. So if I, and the third rule is super and this should be the first statement always. Either super we can write or we can write this. Right? So if but both if I write, then what it will get? We'll get the compilation error saying see, all to this must be first statement in the constructor. So this, what it is saying? It is saying this should not be the second statement. It should be always the first statement of this constructor, right? Call to this constructor must be first statement inside the constructor. So inside this constructor, this should be the first statement. Okay. So then what means after reading this error, what I thought? So I'll put inside the first statement. Okay. So now if I'll try to compile this one, see, call to super must be first statement in constructor, right? It is super. So that means either we can write either super or this. We cannot write both, because if I'll write another like super, then it will always say like the other one should be the first statement, right? So if I'll write super in the second statement, then it will show like this error. Call to super must be the first statement in first. So if I'll write this as in the second statement, so it will giving this error as calling to this this must be first statement inside the constructor. I hope you understood. So yeah, so these are all loopholes for this constructor. What we understood is, like, we have understood as part of this session what is variable and how many types of variables are there. So there are like local variables, instance variable, and static variable. So local variables means the variable which is defined inside this either method or constructor or block, either static block or instance block. Then we can call this as this variable as a local variable. And what is a instance variable? That variable will be outside of the method or outside of the constructor or outside of the block. That variable we can call it as instance variable. And whenever it will add one keyword called static keyword to a variable, then we can call this one as a static variable. Okay. And then after what we understood, how we can write a constructor, if we will not write constructor, then what will be the what issue will get? So that program I have shown you. So the main purpose of constructor is to initialize the instance variable of an object. So to initialize an object, we are going for constructor. Means to initialize the instance variable of an object, so that whenever we create a multiple object, so the proper value will be assigned to that particular object. Right? We will not use the constructor, so the value, all the value will be same. Right? So constructor means when we will go for constructor, initialize the instance variable for that object, we should go for the constructor. Right? Then what we understood, how we can define the constructor. So constructor, how we can write. So there are certain kind of rules are there. Like the name of the constructor should be the name same. It should be same as class name, and the first statement of the constructor either should be this. It should call the this constructor, or it should call the superclass constructor. Okay. So and if we will not write this constructor or superclass constructor, then compiler will create for us a default constructor. Sorry, if we will not create any constructor inside our class, then at the time of compilation, compiler will create the default constructor, and the rule is like every constructor should have either super or this. So if there is no keyword, so there is, if we have not written any these or super, then compiler will write as super. So it will call the superclass constructor. Okay. So yeah. So I hope you guys understood for this constructor concept. So this is very important. So every in the project itself, we need to have the constructor and all constructor concept and all. It is very important. And so I hope I am able to explain you clearly. Thank you so much.